Donner Pass, one of the most beautiful mountain grades in the United States. Located in the Sierra Mountains between California and Nevada, this steep grade is not only tough to climb, but it's also hard going down without going too fast, especially in the winter. But that isn't the only problem. There are also snowdrifts, which trains can get stuck in. Such examples of that include the City of San Francisco snowdrift incident on January 13th, 1952. And you're probably wondering, what if an incident much worse than that one happened? Well, 5 years later, it would happen. Donner Pass would later become the grave of one locomotive that died during a run over Donner Pass. This is the story of Donovan, the Damnated Daylight. Donovan, please be careful going up to the summit. If you keep acting this way, you'll get into an accident, and you can most likely die.
Pah! I've been over Donner Pass many times. It shouldn't be any struggle.
Donovan, Donner Pass is a dangerous place for a train. You could either run away down the grade by your brakes failing or the slippery rails that are covered in ice. Dawn's right, Donovan. You know, when I went over Donner Pass the first time during the winter, I was scared that my air brake system would freeze and I would run away.
Well, I wasn't, because it wasn't even winter time. Sure was hard getting up and down the grade, but I managed to get to my destination.
But that doesn't mean the grade's safe, Donovan. Not to mention, you collided with the lark in the siding, which was a pretty bad enough accident. But please don't get yourself into one that's much worse than that. I agree with Brad. Also, Donner Pass is like a home pass and is equally as dangerous. So just please be careful, Donovan.
You all worry too much. I don't need any of your advice. I can take care of myself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a train to pull.
Those would be the last words Donovan would ever exchange with Ryan, Dylan, Joshua, Brad, Liz, and Atlas.
Engineer, do we have the all clear?
Yep, got the word from the dispatcher. We can go now. Guys, I just get that feeling that something bad is about to happen to him.
So do I, D. So do I.
Uh-oh. What's trouble, driver? We're losing air pressure. It was that moment that Donovan realized Dylan was right. He would lose his air brakes and run away down the grade. Come in, dispatcher! Come in, dispatcher! Southern Pacific, Donner dispatcher to eastbound 4446, over. Yes, this is eastbound 4446. Are you the ones in emergency? Over. Yes, we are! We're almost to 50 miles an hour and we can't slow down. Our air brakes are running out and the rails are slippery and covered in ice.
And soon, Donovan became a runaway. He and his train were picking up speed as they proceeded downhill. They went from 30, which was the speed limit, and went higher, 40, 50, 60, even 70, as they kept going downhill.
Central. Westbound 4464 to Southern Pacific Donner dispatcher, over. Yes, this is Southern Pacific Donner dispatcher to 4464 West, over. Why'd you stop us? There's a runaway coming towards you on track 1. 4464 West, answer me. I don't see any runaway. You be close enough to see her, you be dead. Get it? She's about 4 miles away, so I need you to pull onto track 2 at once. Repeat, at once.
Oh my gosh.
Why are we crawling? That runaway could be coming at any second now. We gotta clear fast!
There was nothing the crew could do to save their train, so they all immediately jump off as soon as possible, leaving Donovan on his own. But as he came around the curve, it happened. A loud, horrific scream was the last sound Donovan ever made as he and his train flew off a curve at 100 miles an hour, collided into a wall of rock. Donovan's boiler exploded from impact, which started a massive fire, and his cars tumbling behind him, spilling their contents. Even the tank cars were loaded with flammable chemicals and hazardous materials, which made the fire even worse. But the fire was later put out 8 hours after the accident, and all the wreckage was cleaned up. After that, the news of Donovan's death started to spread across the entire Southern Pacific Railroad. Dylan, Ryan, Joshua, Liz, Brad, and Atlas heard about it too, and they were heartbroken. They mourned the loss of Donovan, and they watched as Donovan's last remains were taken in for scrap and were eventually cut up. And soon, Donovan was gone. Later on, the cause of the accident was determined to be a kink in the air hose that triggers the brakes and icy rails. When the train started to go downhill, the slack in the train couplers bunched together, which cut off the train's brakes. The kink happened between the 7th and 8th car of the train. Not to mention, there were heavy snowfalls on Donner Pass, which led to the rails getting slippery and get covered in ice. That plus the air brakes led to Donovan's death, and soon Donovan's fate was sealed. About 30 years later, a Canadian National U2G class Northern locomotive was dropping off 3 flat cars of steel beams in a smelter's yard, when all of a sudden, a whistle which sounded like a Milwaukee Road 3 chime could be heard somewhere in the distance. And that whistle belonged to an engine, which it was a Southern Pacific GS4 with war paint, the number 4446, and a grim expression. It was Donovan. Donovan stared at the U2G while the U2G was scared and frozen on the spot, unable to move. But when Donovan started puffing forward towards him, the U2G started to back away. He heard of the story from some of the other engines telling stories to one another, so he knew about Donovan's death as well. But as he kept backing up, he reached a set of buffers, and he couldn't go any further. He was trapped. And once again, the U2G was scared, frozen on the spot, and unable to move, as Donovan puffed closer and closer to him, still staring at him with the same grim expression. The U2G was now shaking in extreme fear, and what he saw next was horrifying. What he saw were 4 demon eyes and fanged teeth. And then, it happened. Donovan killed that poor locomotive. He went for the face, which was the weakest point, and he tortured him until he was dead. By next morning, scrapyard workers arrived for work, and when they went into the smelting shed, They were frightened at the sight of the locomotive corpse, and investigators were called to see what happened to the locomotive. But however, they didn't know what happened. And so after several weeks of investigation, all research would be abandoned, and the fate of Canadian National 6233 would be sealed. Today, Donovan now wears the number 6666 and not 4446 like he used to. If you see a GS4 in a wartime black, 4 demon eyes, a red Mars light, a red headlight, a black number plate with red numbers, that's Donovan. And if he sees you, he'll kill you. Today, Donovan roams the rails of the American Southwest, killing every single engine in his path. So it's my best to warn you that you need to stay away from Donovan, because if you end up encountering him, there's no escape from him. And that is the story of Donovan, the Damnated Daylight. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.